After my wife's stroke, I sent her picture from the hospital bed to our family group and wrote, "Your mother is awake. She keeps asking for your voice." End quote. I sat in that vinyl chair for 9 hours with my phone face up on my knee. My son finally answered at 11:40 at night. He wrote, "Dad, she's 69, and she smoked until she was 50. This was always going to happen. Don't turn it into everybody's emergency." I didn't type back a paragraph. I didn't call him. I looked at those words for a long time, and then I wrote one thing. Understood. 4 months later, a video that a county employee filmed on her phone got shared 1,400 times across 3 states, and my son was one of the people who watched it. What he saw on that screen made him put his hand over his mouth in his own kitchen, and it broke something in him that he has not been able to put back together since. Welcome in, friend. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Before we go any further, tell me down in the comments what town you're in, what state, what country. I read every single one of them, and it means more to an old man than you'd think. I'll say this up front too. Parts of what follows have been changed to protect people who never asked to be in a story. The names are different. The roads are different. But what this leaves behind in your chest is not fiction, and I think you'll know it when you feel it. My name is Raymond Delaney. I'm 71 years old. I drove a yellow school bus for the St. Louis County Schools outside Duluth, Minnesota for 38 years. Route 12. Same route, mostly the same roads. 4 decades of Minnesota winters. I know where the ice forms first on County Road 8. I know the exact mailbox where the Peterson twins used to be standing at 6:52 every morning with frost on their eyebrows. Some men know their work. I knew mine, the way you know your own hands in the dark. The morning it happened was the 14th of February. I remember because Nora had put a card on the kitchen table for me before I left, the way she has every single year since 1979, and I hadn't opened it yet because I was running late. I was on the return leg of the afternoon route when my phone buzzed in the holder on the dash. I don't answer while I'm driving. 38 years, I've never once answered while I'm driving. There were 19 kids behind me and 11 inches of packed snow on the shoulder, so I finished the route. I pulled into the lot at 4:20. Walked the aisle checking seats the way I have walked it every single day of my life, and only then did I pick up the phone. 4 missed calls from our neighbor, Ellen Vasquez. I want to tell you something about fear, friend. Real fear doesn't feel like a scream. It feels like the temperature dropping. I stood in the aisle of that empty bus with my breath fogging, and I felt everything in me go cold and quiet and very, very slow. Ellen had found Nora on the front steps. She'd gone out to shovel and her right side had stopped answering her. Ellen said she was talking, but the words were coming out sideways, and she'd called the ambulance, and they'd taken her to St. Luke's. I drove my own truck to that hospital doing 45 and a 50 because I could hear Nora's voice in my head telling me not to be a fool about it. 46 years married. She has never once let me panic in her direction. They had her in a room on the 3rd floor. Half her face wasn't cooperating with the other half. When she saw me, she tried to say my name and it came out as something else, and her eyes filled up. Not from pain, from frustration, but because Nora Delaney has never in her life been unable to say exactly what she meant. "I'm here, Nor," I said. "I'm here, Nor." I took her left hand, the one that still worked, and I held it in both of mine. "Take your time. I've got nowhere to be." A doctor came in around 6. Dr. Amara Whitfield, neurology. A tall woman in her 40s with reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She pulled a chair over and sat down, which is how you know it's going to take a while. "Mr. Ama Delaney, your wife has had an ischemic stroke," she said. The good news, and I want to say it first, is that your neighbor called quickly, and that matters more than almost anything else. But we've imaged her neck, and the reason this happened is that her left carotid artery, the main vessel, supplying blood to that side of the brain, is about 80% blocked. 80%. 8. 2. 2. 2. 2. I said. Yes. Which means, without intervention, the risk of a second stroke in the next weeks is significant. We're recommending a carotid endarterectomy. It's a surgical procedure to open the artery and clear it out. It's not a small operation, but it's a well-established one, and we do a lot of them here. Is she going to be all right? Dr. Whitfield didn't look away, and I appreciated her for that. I think there's a very good chance of a meaningful recovery. I also won't pretend there's no risk. But the risk of doing nothing is higher. and it's higher soon. I nodded. I kept nodding, slow, the way you do when you're trying to get information to dissolve into something you can carry. That night, I called our son. Bradley is 41. He's a mortgage broker in Minneapolis. He has a house with a 3-car garage and a kitchen island the size of my first apartment. He was the first Delaney to finish college, and I paid for the part the scholarship didn't cover by driving summer routes for the parks department and a Saturday shift at a lumberyard for 11 years. He picked up on the 4th ring. I could hear a television behind him. Dad. Brad. Your mom had a stroke this afternoon. There was a pause. Not a shocked pause. A calculating one. I've been reading pauses since 1987, because when you drive a bus, the whole job is knowing which quiet means trouble. Okay, he said. Is she? How bad is it? She's talking. Her right side's affected. They want to do surgery on her neck. Surgery. At 69. That's what they're recommending. Huh. I heard him move to another room. Dad, I don't want to be the guy who says this, but has anybody talked about whether that's the right call, cutting on a woman that age? Sometimes these hospitals push procedures because that's how they bill. I looked at the parking lot lights through the window. Little orange halos in the falling snow. The doctor says the risk of not doing it is higher. Sure, she would say that. Amen, he exhaled. Look, keep me in the loop. Cheryl and I have the Cabo thing the first week of March. That's been paid for since October. So just let me know what the timeline looks like. Your mother would like to hear your voice, Brad. I'll call this weekend. I gotta go, Lily's got a thing. The line went dead. I stood there in that hallway, holding a dark phone. He did not call that weekend. They did the surgery on the 22nd. I sat in a waiting room with 18 chairs and a coffee machine and a television playing a cooking show with the sound off, and I counted ceiling tiles until I lost my place and started over. 4 hours. When Dr. Whitfield came out and pulled her mask down and said the words, "It went well," my legs stopped holding me the way they were supposed to, and I had to sit back down. Friend, let me stop right here, because I know some of you are bracing for something. I know how these stories usually go, and I know some of you have already decided in your heart that this is a story where the wife doesn't make it, and you're holding your breath through the whole thing, waiting for the hammer. Nora is alive. She is in the next room right now, and about 20 minutes ago she came in here and told me my coffee had gone cold and I was being dramatic about the lighting. What happened to our family was not a death. It was something else, and honestly, I'm not sure it wasn't worse. They moved her to a room on the 4th floor that evening. She was groggy, and there was a line of tape on her throat, and her voice was a rasp, but she was there. Her eyes were her eyes. She squeezed my hand with real force and said, "Ray, take a picture." What? Take a picture and send it to the family. I want them to see I'm still ugly and still here. So, I did. I propped my phone against a water pitcher and took a photo of her giving a thumbs up with her left hand, tape on her neck, hair flat on one side, grinning, crooked. I sent it to the group chat we've had since 2019. Me, Nora, Bradley, Cheryl, and I typed, "Your mother is awake. She keeps asking for your voice." The 3 little dots appeared at 6:15 p.m. Then they went away. They appeared again at 7:40, went away. Dad, I sat in that vinyl chair while the light went out of the window, and the parking lot lights came on, and a nurse came in twice to check the monitor. Nora slept. The heat vent ticked. Somewhere down the hall a man laughed at something on a television. At 11:40, the phone lit up in my hand. Dad, she's 69 and she smoked until she was 50. This was always going to happen. Don't turn it into everybody's emergency. And under it, 30 seconds later, one more. Will come up when things settle down. I read it 4 times. Not to find something different in it. To make absolutely certain I wasn't being unfair. That I wasn't being, as Bradley has told me my whole life in one way or another, too sensitive about things. No, I had it exactly right. I put the phone in my shirt pocket, and I sat there in the dark, with my wife's monitor beeping, and I thought about the winter of 1991, when Bradley was 6, and had croup so bad he sounded like a seal, and I sat with him in the bathroom with the shower running hot for 3 hours because the steam was the only thing that helped, and I fell asleep on the tile and woke up with my neck locked sideways for a week. I thought about 2002, when he called me from a dorm in Mankato at 1 in the morning because his transmission had gone out on a county road, and I drove 2.5 hours in a snowstorm with a tow strap in the back of the truck, and didn't say one word to him about the fact that I'd told him to get the fluid checked in September. And I thought about his wedding in 2011. He came to me in the church basement, adjusting his cuffs, and he said, "Hey Dad, when people ask what you do, could you just say transportation? Not, like, bus driver. Just transportation." And I said, "Sure, bud." And I watched him exhale like I'd taken a rock out of his shoe. I never told Nora about that one. 46 years. And that's the only thing I kept from her. I sat forward with my elbows on my knees and put my face in my hands. My palms are cracked and dry from 4 decades of diesel and road salt and cheap gloves. I pressed them against my eyes until I saw shapes. I was raised by a man who believed that complaining was a hobby for people with too much free time. You take what comes. You do your work. You don't make a scene. That coat fit me so long, I forgot I had it on. But sitting in that chair, with my wife's blood finally moving the way it was supposed to move, I felt something in my chest give way, not break. I've been broken before, and I know what that is. This was more like a window that's been painted shut for 30 years, finally coming loose in the frame. "Nor," I said quietly. Her eyes didn't open, but her fingers moved against the blanket. "I'm done being easy about this one. Whatever comes next, I'm done saying it's fine." Her fingers moved again. Not a squeeze. An acknowledgement, like a woman who'd been waiting a long time to hear it. Friend, if you've ever been made to feel like an inconvenience by somebody you raised, do me a favor and type your age in the comments right now. Just the number. I want to see how many of us are out here. Bradley came up 11 days later. He brought a fruit and cheese basket, the kind with the cellophane and the little ribbon, and a bouquet of grocery store lilies that he set on the counter and never put in water. Cheryl came with him. She works in what she calls estate planning, which I've learned is a phrase that can mean about 9 different things depending on who's paying. He was warm. I'll give him that. He hugged his mother carefully like she was made of something breakable. He asked about her recovery. He asked how the physical therapy was going, how long until she was driving again, what the timeline was for full function. He never once asked her if she'd been scared. 38 years of watching kids get on a bus, and you learn to hear the difference between a question that wants an answer and a question that's clearing a path. After about 20 minutes, he sat forward with his elbows on his knees and his voice changed registers, warmer, slower. The voice of a man moving toward a number. "Dad, while we're all here, Cheryl and I have been talking, and we want to get ahead of some things. For you guys, not for us." "What things?" "Financial things. Look, I do this for a living, so let me just be useful for once." He pulled a folder out of a leather bag. 2 pieces. 1. There's a reverse mortgage product that would let you pull equity out of this house without a monthly payment. That's real cash, right now, for Mom's care. Home health, the therapy copays, whatever comes. 2nd, there's a family trust structure that would move the assets into a protected vehicle so Medicaid can't come after them later. It's standard. Everybody with a house does this. I looked at the folder on my coffee table. "The assets?" I said. "The house, the cabin, the accounts? That's not assets, Brad. That's the house your mother has cleaned every Saturday since 1985. He put his hands up, generous, patient. "Dad, I'm not taking anything. It's a structure. You'd still live here. Nothing changes for you day to day. It just means it's managed properly instead of getting eaten by a nursing home at $9,000 a month." Nora was in her chair with the Afghan over her knees. She had not said anything for several minutes. And I want you to understand something about my wife when Nora Delaney goes quiet. That is not weakness. That is a woman loading. "Bradley," she said. Her voice was still rough from the tube. "Which attorney drew these up?" He blinked. "One time. Very fast. Cheryl's firm has a guy." Nora folded her hands in her lap, very deliberately. "1, 1, A, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, I, 1, 1, 1, time, 1, 1, 1, 1, time, left. He lived them. I. Then when you've got a draft, we'll have our own attorney read it. Both sides with their own counsel. That's just how it's done, isn't it? Something moved behind my son's eyes. Not anger. Recalculation. He smiled, and that smile took about half a second longer to arrive than the ones before it. Absolutely, he said. Whatever makes you comfortable. They left. 40 minutes later, he shook my hand at the door and held it a beat too long and said, "We just want you two taken care of." I watched his car back down the driveway. Through the window I could see Cheryl's phone already up at her ear before they hit the road. When I came back inside, Nora had both hands gripping the arms of her chair, her knuckles gone pale. "That man," she said, and her voice was shaking with a fury she'd been holding in for 40 minutes, "came into my house 19 days after they cut my throat open with a cheese basket and asked us to sign our home over. He said it's a structure. Ray." She pressed her hand flat against her chest. "Go get the folder." I got the folder. I sat down at the kitchen table under the light and I read all 41 pages, twice, with a pen in my hand, the way I used to read a route change order. And on page 33, buried behind 2 pages of boilerplate about successor trustees, there was a quitclaim deed. Not for the house. For the cabin on Birchwood Lake. My father's cabin. The one my dad built in 1961 with a borrowed level and a bad back, transferring title to Bradley R. Delaney, individually. Not to a trust. Not to Nora, and me with him, as a beneficiary. To him. Alone. I sat there with my hand flat on that page for a long, long time. Then I got up, and I went to the drawer by the stove, and I got out a spiral notebook and a pen, and I wrote down the date, February the 3rd visit, the time he arrived, 2:15 p.m., what he brought, every word he said about the trust. The half-second, the smile took. The lilies sitting on my counter in their cellophane with no water in them, dying. I wrote it in the same block print I used on incident reports for 38 years. And when I was done, I looked at what I'd written, and I felt something settle into my chest that wasn't calm exactly. It was more like readiness. Like the feeling you get on the bus when the sky goes a certain color and you know the roads are about to turn, and you check your chains before anybody tells you to. Nora called an attorney the next morning. A woman named Denise Okafor, 40-something. Small office above a hardware store in Cloquet. I sat across from her and she read the folder without saying a word for 11 minutes. Then she took her glasses off. "Mr. Delaney, I'm going to say this without lawyer language. Is that all right? Please. This isn't protection. Page 33 transfers your lake property to your son outright, today, with no consideration and no life estate for you. The reverse mortgage on top of it would strip the equity out of your primary residence into cash, which, under the trust language on page 19, your son as trustee has broad discretion to apply toward your care. Meaning he decides. And once there's no equity left in this house and no cabin, the only thing standing between you and a facility is his goodwill." I heard Nora breathe out. Denise put the folder down. "Can I tell you something personal? My mother signed a packet like this in 2016. She thought she was protecting her house. She died in a shared room in Brainerd and my brother sold the house 8 months later. So no, I'm not going to be neutral about this." I said, "What do we do?" And she said, "We don't sign anything. And we start building the other file." Now before I tell you what was in the green metal lunchbox in my basement, and why it changed absolutely everything about what happened next, I need to know you're still riding with me. Type the number 12 in the comments right now. Route 12. 38 years, one road, and a secret I never told my own wife. Here it is. In 1997, I was driving the north leg of Route 12, which took me over the Birchwood Creek Bridge twice a day with 41 kids on board. That February, I noticed the bus doing something on the approach. A shutter. Not the road. Something in the deck. I stopped one morning before my run, in the dark, at 5:40, and I got down on the frozen bank with a flashlight and looked up at the underside of that bridge. And on the second girder from the east abutment there was a crack running back from a weld, maybe 4 inches, with rust weeping out of it in a stain the shape of a hand. I wrote it up. Standard form, carbon copy, 1 to transportation, 1 to the county. Nothing happened. I wrote it up again in March, in April, in September, when the crack was 6 inches. Each time I kept my carbon. In October, a supervisor named Hollis called me into the shop office and told me I needed to stop filing unauthorized infrastructure assessments, that I was a driver, not an engineer, and that I was making the county look bad. He wrote me up for route deviation because I'd started taking the kids around on County 8, which added 9 minutes. I kept taking County 8. In November, he suspended me 3 days without pay for insubordination. Nora asked me why I was home on a Tuesday, and I told her the county was reorganizing routes. That's the one lie I've told my wife in 46 years, friend. And I'm not proud of it. I went back to work and I kept driving County 8, and I wrote it up a 6th time, and this time I mailed a copy to the State Department of Transportation in St. Paul with a photograph I'd taken with a disposable camera from the creek bank. In February of 1998, a state inspector came out. They closed Birchwood Creek Bridge that same afternoon. The county retrofitted it over the following 2 years. New girders, full deck replacement. The final report used the phrase advanced fatigue cracking with potential for progressive failure under live load. 9 months after that, a bridge with the same design, 2 counties east, dropped a gravel truck into a river. Nobody at that county ever apologized to me. Hollis retired in 2003 with a plaque. My personnel file still had that suspension in it when I turned in my keys. And I never told a soul. Not Nora. Not Bradley. Not. I put the 6 carbon copies in the photograph in a green metal lunchbox my father had used at the paper mill, and I put it on the shelf in the basement behind the paint cans, and I drove Route 12 for another 27 years. You want to know why I kept quiet? Because I'd already gotten what I wanted. The bridge was closed. The kids were safe. Making noise after that wasn't for the kids anymore. It would have just been for me. That's what I believed at 43. I still mostly believe it. But I'll tell you what I understood. Sitting at my kitchen table at 71 years old with my son's folder open in front of me, I have been documenting things carefully, in dated block print, with carbon copies, since before that boy could drive. Which meant when my son eventually told a judge that his father was losing his grip on reality. I had 38 years of evidence to the contrary sitting in my basement behind the paint cans. Denise and I spent March and April building my physician's cognitive evaluation, done properly, on the record. A full accounting of every dollar in and out of our household for 10 years, which took me 9 evenings, and which I enjoyed more than I care to admit, a certified copy of the cabin deed, a recorded declaration of homestead, and an affidavit from Denise's paralegal documenting the chain of custody on that 41-page folder. Bradley called twice in that period, and I was pleasant with him both times. I asked about Lily. I said we were still reviewing the paperwork. He said, "No rush, Dad. And here's the part I want you to sit with, friend." The whole time he thought I was a confused old man slowly working his way through a document he didn't understand. He had no idea we were already 8 moves down the road. In May, the county announced they were rededicating the Birchwood Creek Bridge after the final phase of reconstruction. Somebody in the highway department had gone through the archives to write the history for the ceremony program, and somebody else had actually read the 1,998 state inspection file, and in that file were 6 carbon copies from a bus driver. A woman from the county called me and asked if I would come. I said I'd rather not make a thing of it. She said, "Mr. Delaney, please come." So on a Saturday morning in June, Nora and I drove out to a bridge over a creek and sat on folding chairs on the gravel shoulder with about 140 people, county commissioners, 2 state engineers, a pastor, a high school band that played slightly out of tune, which was perfect. A retired engineer named Walter Sundstrom got up and talked about fatigue cracking for 6 minutes, and then he stopped, and he looked at his notes, and he said, "I want to tell you why this bridge got inspected in 1998. It wasn't an engineer. It was a man who drove 41 children over it twice a day and got down in the snow with a flashlight because his bus was shuttering wrong. He filed 6 reports. He was written up twice and suspended once for his trouble. He kept his carbon copies for 27 years. His name is Raymond Delaney, and he is sitting in the 4th row. 140 people turned around. I have never in my life wanted to be somewhere else so badly. And then a man stood up near the back, mid-30s, heavyset, in a Duluth Fire and Rescue polo shirt. "My name's Marcus Reyes," he said, and his voice carried without a microphone. "I rode Route 12 from 1994 to 2001. I was on that bus. I'm a paramedic now. I have 2 kids. I have 2 kids. He stopped and worked his jaw. "I found out this morning what almost happened to us. Mr. Delaney, you took 9 extra minutes every day for a year and got written up for it and never said one word to any of us." He looked right at me across all those chairs. "Thank you. I mean it with everything I've got." I could not speak. I pressed my lips together and nodded, and my eyes went bad enough that I had to blink hard 3 times before the world came back. Nora had my hand in both of hers, and she was crying the way she cried when Bradley was born, completely, with no management of it at all. You, she said against my knuckles, have been lying to me since 1997. I told you the county reorganized routes. Ray Delaney, they suspended you. It was 3 days. Ray. She laughed and cried at the same time and held my hand so hard it hurt, and I let it hurt, because some pain is exactly the right kind. A woman from the county communications office had filmed the whole thing on her phone. She put it up that afternoon. By Wednesday it had been shared 1,400 times. Bradley called me on a Thursday night. First time he'd called instead of texted in 7 months. I let it ring twice, not to make a point. I just needed 2 rings to decide what kind of conversation I was willing to have. Dad. His voice was different, sanded down. I saw the video. I figured you might. I didn't know any of that. Why didn't you ever tell me? And I said, because I didn't think it would change anything, Brad. And then, because I'd promised myself I was done being careful. I'm not sure it changes anything now either. He was quiet a long time. Then he asked if we could meet. Just us, not Cheryl. We met at a diner off Highway 53. Vinyl booths. Pie under glass. Nobody, either of us knew. He was already there with both hands around a coffee mug and the particular tired look of a man who's been losing an argument with himself for about a week. He apologized. Real words in the right order about the text message, about the timing, about the cheese basket. I watched his hands loosen on that mug the way hands do when somebody is actually putting a thing down instead of just describing it. And then he said, "But Dad, I still think some version of the trust." I set my coffee down. "Brad, stop." He stopped. "You drove up here still hoping I'd sign. I need you to hear me clearly. One time, so we never have to do this again. I am never going to sign that. Not a version of it. Not a friendlier one. And it isn't because I don't love you." My hands were flat on that table and my heart was going so hard I was sure he could hear it. "It's because I read page 33. And a man who buries page 33 doesn't get to hold the pen for the rest of my life." His eyes filled. His chin went once, hard. "I don't know how we got here," he said. "I do," I said, gently. "But that's a longer conversation than tonight." 9 days later, Denise called me. Her voice had that flat quality lawyers get when they've already finished processing the news so you don't have to watch them do it. "Ray, Bradley filed a petition for guardianship in St. Louis County. He's alleging diminished capacity. He's got a physician's letter from a doctor in Edina you've never met." My stomach went down about 6 inches. "Can he do that?" "He did it. Whether it works is a completely different question." Her voice sharpened. "Ray, I have been waiting for this since March. Come in tomorrow." The hearing was on the 8th of August. Nora ironed my good shirt twice, and then a 3rd time, because she couldn't sit still. "Ray." At the door, she put her hand flat on my chest and looked at me with eyes that were terrified and fierce at the same time and said, "Come home with good news." I intended to. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and floor wax. Bradley sat across the aisle with an attorney I didn't recognize. Cheryl wasn't there. Lily wasn't there. My son did not look at me one single time during that entire proceeding, and that told me everything about where he was inside himself. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain. She read our exhibits without comment. My physician's evaluation. 10 years of financial records in my handwriting. The recorded deed. The original 41-page folder with page 33 tabbed in yellow. And the 6 carbon copies from 1997 with the state inspection report clipped behind them. She took her glasses off and set them on the bench. "Petition denied," she said. "Mr. Delaney has demonstrated full decisional capacity and, frankly, a standard of personal record-keeping I wish I saw more often in this courtroom." She looked at my son. "Counsel, I'd advise the petitioner to think very carefully before bringing anything like this again. And I'd note that page 33 of the petitioner's own proposed instrument is now part of this record. That last sentence did more than she probably intended. The bank Bradley worked for opened an internal compliance review in September because a licensed mortgage professional putting an uncompensated quitclaim of his parents' property inside a trust packet is not a family matter, it's a licensing matter. He was placed on administrative leave in October. Cheryl's firm let her go quietly 2 weeks after that. I take no pleasure in telling you that, friend. I'm telling you because I know some of you have been asking whether people like this ever face anything at all, and sometimes, when there's a record, they do. The Monday after the hearing, I sat in Denise Okafor's office and did the thing I'd been putting off. I changed the beneficiary on both retirement accounts and the life insurance. I revised the will, the house and the cabin go to Nora, and after Nora, into a trust for Lily, administered by Denise, that Bradley cannot touch, borrow against, or accelerate. Lily gets it at 25. Bradley gets my father's tools and my dad's watch and the 1,994 truck. He is not going to get $1 he can spend before my granddaughter is grown. I want to say something to you directly and then I'll finish the story. If you're over 65 and somebody in your family comes to you with a folder, I want you to remember 4 things. Never ever sign a document that was drafted by an attorney your child is paying. Get your own lawyer, even if it costs you $800 you don't want to spend. That is the cheapest $800 you will ever spend in your life. Write down the date, the time, and the exact words in a notebook they don't know about. And this week, go online to your county recorder and find out whose name is actually on your deed right now. Not whose name you think is on it. Whose name is on it. Nora and I are not finished arguing about this, and I'll be honest with you about that too. She wants to open the door. She says Lily is 9 years old and doesn't get a vote in who her father is, and that if we hold this line for 10 years, we're not punishing Bradley. We're punishing a child who thinks Grandpa's cabin is a place with a good dock. I say, a man who filed papers to have me declared incompetent doesn't walk back into my kitchen because he shares my last name. We have had this conversation 11 times. We have not settled it. So, I want to ask you, friend, and I mean this, I'm not asking to be polite. Nora thinks I should let him in for Lily's sake. I don't. Tell me down there who you think is right, because between the two of us we've got 141 years of living, and we cannot figure it out. Thanksgiving came in November. Our table had the leaf in. Ellen Vasquez came, who called the ambulance. Denise Okafor came with her husband. Marcus Reyes came with his wife and his 2 boys, who ate an unreasonable amount of pie and asked me whether a bus can drive on ice, which it can, if you know what you're doing. Lily came, for 4 hours, dropped off and picked up. That's where we've landed for now. It isn't everything. It's not nothing. At some point, Marcus's youngest looked around at that loud, crowded table and announced, "Everybody's here." And Nora caught my eye down the length of it and smiled at me, full and warm and completely unguarded. And I thought, no, son, not everybody, but everybody who showed up. End quote. End quote. End quote. End quote. That's the thing nobody tells you. Family isn't the people who share your name. It's the people who sit in waiting rooms and courthouse hallways and stand up in a 4th row on a gravel shoulder and say your name out loud when it costs them something to do it. My name is Raymond Delaney. I drove a school bus for 38 years, and for most of my life I let people believe that meant I was a small man in a small job who didn't understand how the world worked. Here's what I learned at 71 that I wish somebody had told me at 40. Dignity doesn't announce itself. It isn't in a title, or a salary, or a name on a building. It's in the boring, repeated, unglamorous decision to show up, do the work right, protect the people in your care, and write it down when the world tells you that what you saw didn't happen. I'm not a revenge man. I didn't set out to ruin my son. What I did was simpler than that, and it took me 71 years to do it. I stopped absorbing things quietly and calling it love. That's not revenge, friend. That's justice, and there's a difference. And I think the good Lord puts certain moments in a man's life not to break him but to finally show him what he's been made of the whole time. If I could say one thing to you tonight, it's this. 3 men, don't wait as long as I did. Don't let 70 years go by before you decide your silence has a price. The people who really love you do not need you to be smaller so they can be comfortable, and the people who need you smaller were never loving you to begin with. That's my opinion. I've earned the right to it. If any part of this stayed with you, if you've ever counted ceiling tiles in a waiting room by yourself, or held on to something true that nobody wanted to hear, send this to somebody who needs it tonight. Leave a word down below. And if you believe quiet people deserve to be heard, come sit with us. We'll be here. Thank you for staying to the end, friend. It means more than you know.